2 scoops behind the left ear, the way your mother likes it, Rosaria said. And the old woman in the rolling chair laughed the way she had laughed in that chair every Friday for 28 years. My mother is going to outlive us both, the boss said from the doorway, hat in his hand, rein on his shoulders, the way he always came at the end of the appointment to walk his mother home. Rosa, Tommaso. That was the whole greeting. It had been the whole greeting since he was 16. Since the Friday he had first walked into the back room of her little corner shop to fetch his mother, and had stood in the doorway not knowing where to put his hands. He was 42 now, and he still did not quite know where to put his hands in her shop. He hung his hat on the peg by the calendar. He waited. Rosaria untied the cape, lifted it free of the old woman's lap, and shook the silver clippings into the pan. She set the brush down. She put her warm, dry hands on either side of the old woman's face the way she did at the end of every Friday, and looked at her in the mirror. You are beautiful, Mrs. Greco, she said. You are a liar, Rosaria. I am the best liar on this street. The old woman patted Rosaria's wrist with the small, slow patting of a hand that had patted her wrist every Friday for 28 years, and then she let her son take her by the elbow and walk her out into the rain. Rosaria watched the black umbrella open over the two of them. She watched the boss settle his mother into the back of the long, quiet car at the curb. She watched the driver close the door the careful way the driver always closed the door for the boss's mother. She turned the sign on the front glass. She locked it. She went into the back to sweep. It was not until Tuesday that the thing she should not have heard happened. And it happened in the kitchen of her cousin's salon, 2 neighborhoods over, where she had gone, the way she always went on a Tuesday, to bring her cousin Pia the pastries her cousin pretended she did not want, and to color out the gray at Pia's temple at the kitchen sink. The trouble was that Pia's nephew Marco had brought a friend home for coffee, and Marco's friend was a thin, loud young man who did not know that the woman at the sink, with the pink towel around her cousin's shoulders, had cut the boss's mother's hair every Friday for 28 years. And that she had cut the hair, at one time or another, of half the wives in the family that fed the table he was sitting at. He did not say a name. He was not a fool. He said the kid, and then he said Friday night, and then he said the backlot behind the import place on Eldridge, and then he said a thing that made Rosaria's hands go quite still in. The warm water at the back of her cousin's neck, he said, in the easy laughing way of a young man who thinks he is among friends, that the kid was being walked there Friday night by his own uncle, and would not be walking out, and that the old man's brother would be told, after the fact, that the kid had crossed a line that the kid had not crossed. He named the uncle. Rosaria did not lift her hands from her cousin's neck. She did not look up. She finished the rinse. She wrapped the towel. She kissed Pia's cheek. She said the small, bright things she always said when she was leaving. She walked out into the gray afternoon and stood at the bus stop 2 corners away and waited until the bus had come and gone 3 times before she let herself sit down on the bench and put her face in her hands for 1 long minute. Then she got up and walked. She did not take the bus. She did not call. She did not, for any of the 7 long blocks it took her to get there, take the small phone out of her pocket. She had cut the hair of women whose phones had been listened to. She had cut the hair of women who had been followed out of their own kitchens by men in slow cars. She walked the long way. She crossed 2 streets she did not need to cross. At the iron gate at the head of the long gravel drive she stopped, because the iron gate was the place where you stopped, and she waited for the man in the small stone house to see her. He saw her. He came out without his coat. He was a big, quiet man named Salvatore who had walked her to her own car on Christmas Eve for 20 years. And when he saw her face in the rain at his gate, he did not ask her any of the questions he was supposed to ask. He unlocked the small side door cut into the iron. He walked her up the drive himself. He took her into the kitchen of the great house by the back, the way the old housekeeper had taken her in 28 years ago, on the Friday the boss's mother had broken her hip and could not come to the shop. The old housekeeper was not in the kitchen anymore. The old housekeeper had died in the spring. There was a new woman at the stove, younger, careful, who took one look at Rosaria's face and put down her wooden spoon and went out without a word. He came in 3 minutes later. He had been in his study. He still had the reading glasses on. He took them off when he saw her standing at the long scrubbed table with the rain in her hair, and the unhurried way he took them off told Rosaria, more than anything had told her in 7 blocks, that he understood already that whatever she had walked here to say in the rain on a Tuesday afternoon was not a small thing. Rosa, Lowen, Tommaso, I have to tell you something. I'm sorry to bring it to your kitchen. I did not want to say it on a telephone. Sit. I will stand. I will be quick, she told him. She told him exactly what she had heard, and where she had heard it, and from whose mouth, and the easy laughing way the young man had said it, and the name of the uncle. She told him the back lot behind the import place on Eldridge. She told him Friday night. She did not tell him the kid, because she did not have to tell him the kid. She watched his face when she said the uncle's name, and she saw, for the first time in 28 years of standing in a room with him, the boss go very still in the particular way of a man who is being told that something he had been carrying in his chest as a small, uneasy weight is now a name he will have to answer for. He did not speak for a long moment. The kettle on the new woman's stove ticked as it cooled. The rain on the kitchen window moved sideways. He looked at her, and Rosaria, who had looked at this man's face in a mirror every Friday for half her life, watched the small, unfamiliar thing happen in his eyes that she would think about later. Alone in her shop, and not be able to name, except to say it was the thing she had hoped without ever letting herself hope. It was there. You walked here, he said. I did not want to use a telephone. You walked 7 blocks in the rain. It is not so far. Rosa, Lowen, Tommaso, it is your sister's boy. I have cut his hair since he was 3. I could not sit at my cousin's kitchen sink and hear what I heard and not come. He nodded once. He did not thank her. She would understand later that he could not yet thank her, because the thing she had just put into his kitchen was still moving in him too hard for thanks. He turned his head toward the door of the kitchen and said one word, "Lo," and Salvatore was there inside of 2 seconds, with the kind of stillness in his shoulders that men get when they have been waiting in a hall. Bring my sister, the boss said. Bring her here. Bring her in the car, not on the telephone. Do not tell her why, and bring me Carmine. And tell Niccolo I want the back lot behind the import place on Eldridge sat on tonight, and every night, by men I trust, until I say otherwise. He is not to go near it himself. No one goes near the boy. The boy goes to school. The boy comes home. The boy does not know. Salvatore went. The boss turned back to Rosaria. He looked at her standing wet at his table with her purse in both hands like a woman waiting for a bus. He took the chair out for her himself and held it. She sat. The new woman at the stove brought her a towel and a cup of tea and put a hand briefly on her shoulder the way one woman in a kitchen does when she has understood without being told that another woman has done a brave thing. Drink that, he said. I am all right. Drink it anyway. She drank it. He sat across from her. He did not ask her to repeat the story. He had heard it the first time, with the part of him that did not need a thing said twice. He asked her, instead, about her cousin Pia, and the salon kitchen, and the young man's first name, and whether the young man had said anything else, and whether the young man had seen her face, and whether her cousin's nephew Marco was the kind of young man who told the women in his life what he had been hearing in his uncle's car. He asked it the slow, careful way he asked his mother whether she had taken her pills. He wrote nothing down. He did not raise his voice. When he was done, he put his big hands flat on the scrub table and looked at them. And for a long, quiet minute, he was a man Rosaria had not seen before. A man at his own kitchen table, with his sister's boy in his head, and his sister's husband's brother in his head, and the rain on his window, doing the long arithmetic of a thing he could not let happen, and could not also let be public, because the boy could not ever know. Rosa, he said finally, without lifting his eyes from his hands. Have I ever, in 28 years, asked anything of you? No. Have I ever in 28 years let anyone in my house ask anything of you? No. I am asking now. You will not go back to your shop tonight. You will sleep in this house tonight. In the green room at the top of the back stair. Tomorrow morning, Salvatore will drive you to your shop and sit in his car at your curb for as long as it takes me, in my way, to make sure that no one who heard the young man speak on Tuesday afternoon will think for 1 second that anyone in my house was sent any word by any woman with pink towels. Do you understand me? Yes. You did not come here. You came to bring my mother a comb she had left on Friday. The comb is in your purse. You will give it to me when you leave. Yes. Rosa. She looked up. Thank you. It was the second time in 28 years he had said her name with that particular weight. The first had been at the old housekeeper's funeral in April, in the wet grass at the cemetery, when he had stopped in front of her on his way back to the cars and had said low, Rosa, and nothing else, because she had been the only person at that grave who had been in his mother's kitchen as many Fridays as the woman in it. She held his eyes now, the way she had held them then. She did not look away. You are welcome, Tommaso. His sister came 40 minutes later. The sister was a tall, composed woman with the boss's same dark eyes and the boss's mother's same straight back, and when the boss took her by the elbow and walked her into the study and closed the door, Rosaria sat in the kitchen with the new young woman at the stove and drank a second cup of tea and listened, through the wall, to the low, careful sound of a brother telling his sister that someone she loved was being lined up for a betrayal that her son could never be allowed to know about. What happened after Friday, Rosaria was told only the smallest pieces of, and she was told them the way the boss told his mother things, gently, sideways, and so that she would never have to carry more than her share. She was told on the following Tuesday at her shop, by Salvatore at her curb, that the boy had gone to school on Friday and had come home from school on Friday and had eaten his supper at his mother's table and had not in any way been near a backlot behind any import place on any Eldridge. She was told, a month later, by the boss's mother in the rolling chair under the warm towel, that the uncle had taken a long trip out of the country to look after a sick aunt, and that the family had decided, for everyone's peace, that the trip should be a long one. She was told the Friday after Christmas by the boss himself at the door of her shop with his hat in his hand, that there was a small thing he wished to put on her wall, if she would let him, beside the calendar. He hung it himself. It was a small framed photograph of his mother and Rosaria, taken 20 years before, in the back room of that same shop, both women laughing at something neither remembered now. Underneath the photograph, in a small brass plate, were 3 words in his mother's careful hand, for our Rosa. She did not cry. She had not cried in her shop in 40 years, and she did not see why she should start. She put her hand on his arm the way she put her hand on his mother's wrist at the end of every Friday and said, It is a beautiful frame, Tommaso. And he nodded the way his mother nodded, when she did not quite trust her voice. He did not say, then or ever, the thing she would understand later, alone in the shop after he was gone, that the small frame on the wall beside the calendar was not a thank you for a Tuesday afternoon in the rain. It was a notice, hung in the one place every woman in his family came at least once a month and read without being told, that the woman who had cut his mother's hair for 28 years was not a tradeswoman the house used. She was the house's. She had been since the first Friday she had walked in to fetch a woman who could not come to her, and she would be until the last Friday one of them was alive to be combed by the other. The frame on the wall was a covering, the kind of quiet protection a man like that puts over what he loves, so that no one who walks into a room and sees the photograph will ever again make the mistake of thinking that the small woman with the pink towel at the sink is a stranger to the table. She sets her hands on every week. On the Friday after the frame went up, the boss's mother sat down in the rolling chair and pointed at it in the mirror and said, Look at us, Rosa. We were young. We are still young, Mrs. Greco. You are a liar, Rosaria. I am the best liar on this street. The old woman laughed, the laugh she had laughed in that chair every Friday for 28 years. And outside in the rain, the long, quiet car waited at the curb the way it had always waited, and the man inside it sat with his hat on his knee and watched the lit window of the shop, where his mother was being made beautiful by the woman who had walked 7 blocks in the rain on a Tuesday afternoon to keep his sister's boy alive.